Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is November 2nd, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? Let's go to Avdiivka first. I'm going to do a quick map update, and then I want to give my 2 cents on the interview that was given with General Zaluzhnyi in an article that came out as a result of that interview today on The Economist, which was very interesting. And so let's go first towards Avdiivka. So again, we're now reaching almost now nearly a month of fighting around Avdiivka since the Russians have launched their huge offensive here. They're trying to push in the north and the south by trying to encircle the city of Avdiivka. So far, we're reaching almost 1 month, and the Russians have not been able to consolidate territory from the south and the north to kind of partially at least encircle Avdiivka, which is very good for the Ukrainians. In the north, the Russians have been stopped at this railway line that divides the city of Krasnohorivka and the village of Stepove. So you can see that there's a railway line and some posadkas, and every time that the Russians are trying to cross here, essentially they're being pushed out by Ukrainian artillery and FPV drones. And there's another video that came out today of another Russian push and full of armored vehicles, and they were completely destroyed with FPV drones and Ukrainian artillery. So far, this is not working out for the Russians. However, you can see that there's been a small development north of Krasnohorivka, and that is the Russians taking a little bit of ground here. And you can see there's another railway line here. So the Russians have had some success here in the north of Krasnohorivka. So I think that they perhaps are switching their tactics, and they're trying to now push towards the village of Novokalinove and Keramik, which would bring them further north from Krasnohorivka. There's also rumors, and they're only rumors, of a Ukrainian counteroffensive on this highway, on the H2O highway. And now the rumors are saying that the Ukrainians have been able to push the Russians about 1 to 2 kilometers in on this highway. So it would be very significant if true, but there's still rumors for now. So we'll have to see. And as to the south of Avdiivka, nothing has changed for the Russians for the past week. They have not really gotten any ground here, so that's really good for the Ukrainian forces as well. So far, the Ukrainians are holding strong, and we can see that the Russians are not able to really encircle and close that encirclement of Avdiivka, so that's really good. Now, the other interesting development today is another Russian offensive in Vuhledar. Very surprised by this one, but they failed their initial massive campaign in Vuhledar in the winter of 2022 and 2023. It was actually disastrous for the Russians, and I would equate it to Avdiivka. Now, Avdiivka has become far worse for the Russians than Vuhledar, but it's pretty much on par. And today they launched another offensive, and they failed. So there was about 18 armored Russian vehicles that were destroyed. And the Ukrainians, again, they have very good positions in Vuhledar, so it's very hard for the Russians to do anything meaningful here. So I'm not expecting any big breakthroughs for the Russians in this front, but that's good because this only is, another black hole for Russia to throw more and more resources and lose more men and more vehicles. The other development is in Orikhiv, and so I talked about it in my video on Tuesday. The Ukrainians managed to liberate kind of this territory northwest of Robotine. They managed to liberate these trenches that were built by the Russians. And now you can see that they've also liberated some fields kind of in the center west of Robotine, so a little bit more down from their initial liberation here. And so this gives a little bit more breathing room for the Ukrainian forces that are positioned right now in Robotine, which allows them to then direct more successful attacks in Novoprokopivka. So let's hope that perhaps by the end of this year, the Ukrainians will be able to take the village of Novoprokopivka, positioning them even better to then push further about halfway through in the Surovikin line. And the last update would be in the left bank of the Dnieper River, so in Kherson. I can say with confidence now that the Ukrainians have been able to liberate, at least partially take, the village of Krinki. So this is another bridgehead that the Ukrainians are working on building, and that's kind of the third one that the Ukrainians have built. So they have one in Antonivka, so the Ukrainians can successfully now transfer troops by boats from the right bank to the left bank, which is close to Oleshki. They've also taken good positions close to Kozachilahiri, and now they have another one in Krinki. So they have at least 3 bridgeheads that have been built in the last few months. Now, we'll see how that develops, but I'm pretty sure that the Ukrainians are trying to build these bridgeheads to eventually successfully transfer tanks and other armored vehicles from the right bank to the left bank and continue pushing the Russians further and further away from villages and settlements in the Kherson region, in the left bank, essentially. So we'll see how that develops, but this is very good for the Ukrainians because this is potentially opening a new front in the next few months for Ukraine. We'll see. So that's the update in terms of the map right now. Now, I want to talk about the interview that was given with General Zaluzhnyi, so the general of the Ukraine Armed Forces. He's a very well-respected military man. And if I remember, this is now... He barely gave any interviews since the war started. This is, I think, his 3rd or 4th interview that was given to the Western press. And this one is kind of a cold shower, to be honest, for all of us, because he gives a very sort of pragmatic view on the Ukraine counteroffensive over the summer and over the fall, and essentially saying that Ukraine right now is a stalemate with Russia, that they have not been able to shift the front line, and that he's not expecting any deep or beautiful breakthroughs anymore because of the fact that they don't have the element of surprise. Russia's built very strong defenses, and basically they have reached a parity, meaning that there is a balance between what Russia has and what Ukraine has. He says that essentially the stalemate reminds him a lot of World War I, the World War I fighting, where there haven't been any huge gains by both, either sides, and that they need to find a solution to that, and they need to find a new technological breakthrough or edge against Russia, because every time Ukraine has an edge over Russia, Russia can quickly have an answer to that. And we can see, an example of this situation is Ukraine, let's say, flying those FPV drones, which I talked about in my previous video on Tuesday. Yeah, Ukraine can build 15,000 of them, but Russia now has moved more and more electronic warfare systems to the front line, making it much harder for Ukraine to fly reliably all of these drones because they can lose signal because of these jammers. So that is an answer that Russia has given. And also Russia has copied Ukraine. You would expect that after 2 years of fighting that Russia would also copy what Ukraine has so successfully built and developed in terms of the FPV drones. And Russians are now flying their own FPV drones and able to also do damage to Ukrainian forces when they're pushing. And he also talks about, General Zaluzhnyi talks about the fact that whatever Ukrainians are able to see, the Russians are able to see. The Russians are also flying their reconnaissance drones over the front line. So any element of surprise that Ukraine is hoping to get isn't there anymore because Russia has thousands of these DJI Mavic or other drones that they're flying. They're capable of finding out exactly where the Ukrainian forces are positioned. So it makes everything so much harder for Ukraine in order to have these big, successful breakthroughs like we saw in the summer of 2022. And the last thing he talked about, actually 2 things he talked about, is the fact that he underestimated, and that also, that would include myself, I severely underestimated, the Russia's willingness to sacrifice troops. And he talks about the fact that Russia at least lost 150,000 soldiers. Now we know that it's probably even higher than that. I talked about in my previous video that it's close to 300,000 Russian soldiers dead, most likely. And there is no sign that Russia's going to stop, right? It's not, it's not like Putin's going to decide that, oh, that's it, 300,000, we go home. He's going to throw another 300,000 men if necessary. And I think I've had this realization right after Bakhmut, where they literally used men just for pure meat waves, and they've lost up to 50,000 men during that campaign, and they were completely fine with that. So that was a huge underestimation for the Ukrainians and the West, thinking that Russia simply would not allow such huge casualties, and yet they're okay with that. And Ukraine simply can't allow that on their end. Ukraine can't just throw men after men after men. They have also limited amount of resources and manpower for that. And so at the end of the interview, he says that there is essentially many things that Ukraine needs in order to break disparity and give another edge to Ukraine, which is more air power, meaning Ukraine needs those F-16s as fast as possible, and more drone capabilities. They need more ammunition, far more than previously pledged to Ukraine, more counter battery power and fire capabilities, demining capabilities as well. Right now, one of the issues that Ukraine has is being able to push through all these millions of mines that Russia's put in the entire front line, and especially in the Zaporizhzhia front, where we know that the Russians have just absolutely mined everything left and right. There's actually another article that I think I read today that says that it would take Ukraine up to 700 years to demine everything in Ukraine. That just tells you how much the Russians have mined Zaporizhzhia. It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear that, but it's the reality of war. Russia's done everything possible to not allow another, defeat like they saw in Kharkiv and Kherson. So that is another thing that Zaluzhnyi is saying, is that they need new advances in terms of how they can demine as quickly as possible to be able to break through the Russian defenses as fast as possible. So there's a lot of things here that he's been talking about, but again, this grounds us a lot. This is a pragmatic view on the war, the current situation. And it's a cold shower, to be honest, because, we were expecting back in the spring of this year of 2023, right before the big Ukraine counteroffensive, that Ukraine would have this stellar breakthrough, and in a matter of a few months, they would get to Crimea, but that wasn't the case. And I think that General Zaluzhnyi tries to kind of explain why that is, which is really great, because we need these types of comments, not from politicians, but also respected military men like Zaluzhnyi. And we know that Zaluzhnyi is a respectable, profoundly well-trained military person that has earned respect from the entire, world, right? He's really led the successful defense and the offensive for the Ukrainian forces to regain territory in Kharkiv, Kherson, northern Ukraine. So it's important to hear these words from a very powerful and respected person like Zaluzhnyi. And that's the video for today, guys. Let me know what you guys think about this interview. And as I said, for me, I will continue repeating that Ukraine needs far more help. As Zaluzhnyi said, they need more ammunition. They need more weapons from the West. Whatever Ukraine received, although it's absolutely necessary and the Ukrainians are super grateful for it, it's just not enough to fight this military monster that is Russia. We can make fun of Russia, and that's another thing that Zaluzhnyi is talking about, is that do not underestimate the Russian people and the Russian military. Although, yes, they have done a lot of blunders, and at a certain point of time, they can be a joke because of the sheer amount of mistakes that they keep repeating on doing, but they're still a mighty monster that have so much capacity to wage war. We know that they can continue on doing this for years to come, and especially since they have allies such as North Korea that is transferring millions of shells and ammunition to Russia recently, Iran. They can wage this war very, very long, and they can maybe even outlast the Ukrainians on certain fronts. So that is the unfortunate thing right now. So that's the video for today, guys. Let me know what you think about this interview. What are your personal opinions? And thank you again for your support. Again, if you have any spare, dollars, please donate them for the Ukrainian cause, whether it be for, building Ukrainian drones or just helping out Ukrainians. Do that, because Ukrainians need that help, right? They're doing everything possible to win against a monster that is called Russia. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content, like my video, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini!